So there's this thing that happens, and likely over the course of my lifetime will continue to happen a lot, where something has happened, like, quite a while ago, and it only gets dredged back up because whoever it was relevant to has pissed off fans of Taylor Swift. This most recently happened with Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. So last week, he and Taylor Swift were both performing the same night in Liverpool, and during his concert, which had mostly, dad band music attenders, he did some easy stage banter and took some shots at Taylor Swift.
I know we were joking about the Taylor Swift tour earlier. I know that she's on her Eras tour. I'm telling you, man, you don't want to suffer the wrath of Taylor Swift. So we like to call our tour the Errors Tour, because I feel like we've had more than a few eras, and more than a few errors as well. Just a couple. That's because we actually play live. What?
My thing about this, I think he does kind of come across like he's a bit of a dickhead, but it's not in a way that feels out of character for me, for my, associations of Dave Grohl as a person. But it's that insinuation that Taylor doesn't play live that has pissed off the Swifties. The first thing that they pulled out to wield against Dave was that he had once told a story about Taylor playing the piano at a party to bail him out when he was too stoned, and, obviously that is evidence that he does know that she can play live or whatever, and when that didn't really get a ton of traction, I think because you can kind of tell he was already mocking her a little bit in that original clip, there was another thing that got drug up and began to float around on Twitter last weekend. And, something that raised my eyebrows a little bit more than somebody insinuating that, a performer who has 15 million background singers also singing and tracks of her own voice and does sing live for most of the concert, but definitely not every single song. I've seen enough clips. That the Foo Fighters had funded AIDS denialism in the 2000s, which is what this video is actually about. I'll get my disclaimers out of the way here. I've talked about Taylor Swift enough previously on this channel that you probably already know about how I feel about her. I am not really a Foo Fighters fan, but I'm also not going to be doing a full crucifixion of the band, anyone in it, or anybody who likes or liked the band. Also, Taylor does sing live, probably most of the songs on the Eras tour. She sings at least part of it live, but, you can watch clips from it and see how much, there is background singers and vocal tracks and stuff happening, because this is, a tour de force 3-hour performance that she's doing. It's just not one she is belting the whole time during. She just makes it look like she is, and that's part of the performance when you're performing for that long. Her voice would be drained if she was doing the lead vocals for all of those songs that many times every night. It makes sense. But I do think it's one of those things where, as we see Billie Eilish and a couple of others also commenting oh, I wouldn't ever do something like the Eras tour. People don't actually want that. I do think there is some level of sour grapes there where it's somebody who is upping the ante on length and price and what you're selling somebody for that price on concert tickets, and also kind of roping you into having to maybe indulge in some aspects of performance that you would rather not if you wanted to compete. I don't know. And also jealous just in that, what other concert has ever been talked about as much for as long as the Eras tour, right? People talk about concerts when they come to their cities, but I feel like the entire internet has been talking about the Eras tour for a year now. I think it makes sense that artists would maybe be a little bit jealous. And I also think it makes sense that they would be maybe a little bit annoyed. Anyway, that's all to say, I'm not a diehard Swiftie who's making this video because I thought, oh, I will throw my hat in the ring and cancel Dave Grohl. I don't really care. I'm going to tell you about the grift that he partnered up with in the 2000s, and I'm going to tell you what an idiot I think he and his bandmates were for falling for that. But from what I can tell, the band cut ties with the organization over a decade and a half ago, and they've raised money instead for the work Elton John does surrounding AIDS, so they're not still out there doing this. Elton John seems to have forgiven them. And there definitely is, which we will talk about a bit more at the end, kind of a vengeful angle to the way that a lot of this information is getting recirculated by the Swifties or the Taylor Swift defenders, because the Swifties who are throwing it around right now are ones who are mad in a way that I don't feel defensive enough of Taylor Swift to feel. You can find my sources linked in the description below, like always, but I found an article from Mother Jones from 2000 that does not pull any punches. It opens by saying, "Some rock stars want to free Tibet, others want to save Mumia. The Foo Fighters, on the other hand, want their fans to ignore accepted medical wisdom about AIDS." The multi-million album-selling alternative rock outfit has thrown its weight behind Alive and Well, an alternative AIDS information group that denies any link between HIV and AIDS. So Alive and Well, that alternative AIDS information group, is what I am much more upset about here than the Foo Fighters or their involvement with the organization. We'll be discussing Alive and Well a bit more later, but this Mother Jones article is by Silja Talvi, and it is fantastic. And as you likely already know, because I think everybody who knows both the words HIV and AIDS, those two things are, in fact, linked. AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, is the most advanced stage of the HIV infection. This was already very well understood, actually, by the time that the Foo Fighters bassist Nate Mandel read a book by Christine Maggiore called "What If Everything You Thought You Knew About AIDS Was Wrong?" and apparently just said, "Well, shit, yeah, I guess it is, random lady who published this bullshit." I think that is what makes this the most baffling to me as I'm reading about this. The realization that Christine didn't even manage to fool, like, a publishing house into believing what she was spewing. And that didn't even matter, because all she had to do was get it into the hands of the right idiot. And she did. The Foo Fighters were taken by their cause, and they organized a benefit where, according to that Mother Jones article, Foo fans were treated to a speech by Alive and Well founder Christine Maggiore, who believes AIDS may be caused by HIV-related medications, anal sex, stress, and drug use, and implies that people should not get tested for HIV nor take medications to counter the virus. Free copies of Maggiore's self-published book, What If Everything You Thought You Knew About AIDS Was Wrong?, in which she declares, quote, "There is no proof that HIV causes AIDS," end quote, were also passed out to the concert goers. And the article also says about the false understanding that Christine was presenting about HIV. Alive and Well is one of several fringe groups that deny a link between HIV and AIDS. Similar theories have been put forth over the years by various far-right groups and anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists and other so-called HIV refuseniks. I tried to find other sources that also used the term HIV refuseniks, and it doesn't seem to have quite caught on, but I did find doubters, dissidents, and just a whole bunch of HIV/AIDS denialism, which, isn't always not believing that it exists at all, but according to Wikipedia, is the belief, despite conclusive evidence to the contrary, that the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, does not cause acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. Some of its proponents reject the existence of HIV, while others accept that HIV exists, but argue that it is a harmless passenger virus and not the cause of AIDS. Insofar as they acknowledge AIDS as a real disease, they attribute it to some combination of sexual behavior, recreational drugs, malnutrition, poor sanitation, hemophilia, or the effects of the medications used to treat HIV infection. I'm going to link in the description as well to some excellent videos with more information about the actual history of the AIDS crisis and how research into HIV was going by the time of this particular Foo Fighters involvement with what Alive and Well was doing. I highly recommend, just for a history lesson. I really love the Philosophy Tube video I have linked down there. Highly recommend. Alive and Well was an HIV/AIDS denialist organization. I'm unclear if they're still in operation today, though I know that the organization itself did outlive the founder and the woman who gave the speech at the Foo Fighters concert, who passed away from AIDS-related complications in 2008. Christine Maggiore's passing does sort of put a wrinkle in this grift to me. I mean, in my Big June video about the so-called AIDS angel, we very much talked about somebody who was not meaningfully at any kind of risk from the virus and who profited off of it later. And I don't know to what extent what Christine was doing was profitable. I assume it probably was, but she was sick with HIV. Not only that, but she actually also had a child who passed of AIDS-related complications a few years prior to her own passing, and she refused to believe that it was actually anything to do with AIDS. Even to the extent of it becoming a news spectacle, Christine insisted that she was a victim of medical persecution for her beliefs and that she was given a wrong cause of death for her daughter because of that. And experts on the news were weighing in and confirming that the death of this child had to be AIDS-related complications, and she insisted, well, denied, really, was engaging in denialism, that that was not the case. And that's a different version of the word denialism than I usually think about in conjunction with people denying a virus. I mean, again, I will say multiple times in this video, I think it's baffling that anyone involved with the band felt comfortable getting this involved when the thing that the person was saying was very much against the science. And I think it's really disgusting and shameful behavior to have platformed this, but I guess in a way, the fact that Christine was HIV positive does feel to me like a key for how anybody could fall for this. Up until several years after the Foo Fighters concert benefit, Christine was somebody who was in pretty obvious denial about the disease that would later kill her, and she had found the right words to use to present that denial as something other people should join her in. And when I say that I think that the Foo Fighters should have known better, I do mean that. This was a post-Ryan White CARES Act world, and if somebody was saying before HIV medication was available that you can live without it, like, okay, yeah, sure. But if they're saying that after it's available, that's, morally, to me, not legally. I don't know the law. I don't really care whether or not this is actually legally something that somebody would be held responsible for. Morally, my dogma here, I think telling somebody not to take medication that not only could make them better, but also is the only thing that's known to possibly cure something that will likely kill them otherwise, feels to me tantamount to manslaughter, if not murder. I mean, Christ's sake, even the White House at the time made a statement disavowing what the Foo Fighters were getting themselves involved with and expressing their disappointment that they had decided to platform such misinformation, which, as my friend Kit said, is a real Jason figured it out. Jason, this is a real low point kind of moment. Because we have never, ever had a White House administration that was particularly on the ball about the AIDS crisis. And as we read earlier in that quote, Alive and Well wasn't even just asking people not to take their medication. What they advocated for, despite how absolutely contrary it is to the title of their organization, was for people to not even test. Their reasoning was that if the medication was what truly was making people sick, it has to be better to just not know and not take those medications and get the side effects that they think that they were going to get from it. And I cannot fathom how many people died when they didn't need to because they thought, for one reason or another, because shame kept them from getting tested, because they were afraid of the result, because they were afraid of the treatment if they were positive, that they just shouldn't get tested. I can't even begin to put a number on that. By the time AZT was around, people were having rough side effects from the medication, yes, but they were living. They were able to live long enough to get better medications once those were available, to see the science get to a point where they could be made undetectable and untransmissible, not options that you have if you don't get tested and you just die of HIV-related complications without knowing there are antiretrovirals that can save you. And here's the thing. This was conspiratorial junk science. She was promoting bullshit. I don't know how much she knew that what she was promoting was bullshit, and it doesn't change how many deaths she had a hand in, but also, I do kind of want to say that while I don't think that there is room for alternative science, and while it is actively harmful, specifically when it comes to HIV and AIDS, holy shit, does it make a lot of sense to me to be so distrustful of whatever the government had only recently decided to give a shit about, that you listen to somebody who's telling you that they're positive and they're not having any of the consequences of being positive for the virus that you think is associated with being HIV positive. The bassist from the Foo Fighters did not have any other HIV positive friends other than the author of the self-published book he was dumb enough to believe. And he didn't care to look into the science once he was presented with something that has sort of a hopeful message attached to it, as wild and untrue as that hope is. A false hope, a dangerous hope, but one that I can kind of empathize with letting someone talk you into when all you actually know for sure is, man, this is really bad, and nobody who was supposed to do anything about it did for a really long time. Somebody comes up and says, yeah, buddy, and I've got it, and it's because, Big Pharma. And actually, it's the gay people who are doing drugs and having anal sex that are getting AIDS, so I don't have the same thing as them. You know, to me, again, that does feel like it ties into the sort of view of HIV that Reagan had of the virus, to try to change it from being something that comes from the virus we know it comes from, and instead onto something you can blame behavioral aspects for. You know, in truth, while anal sex and intravenous drug use are infection vectors for HIV, so can, you know, contact with blood or any sort of penetrative sex. And so can a baby drinking breast milk. I've always said that I think if the first mostly impacted populations with HIV had been almost anybody else than who it ravaged first, we would have seen not only completely different governmental response, but also much less cultural baggage around it. The kind of cultural baggage that made believing in this pseudoscience seem like a viable route in 2000. I found an article called Don't Buy the HIV Lie by Bruce Merkin, in which he talks about perceptions from former members of Alive and Well after they left. Though this is from when the organization was called HEAL, also tilting into irony for that acronym there. It used to stand for Health Education AIDS Liaison. And in it, the author says that one former member flat out called the organization a cult.
Another ex-dissident who requested anonymity because his San Francisco business clients don't know he has AIDS says that he ignored his failing health until pneumocystic pneumonia nearly killed him. And even then, he resisted treatment. He was, he says, quote, in complete denial, as you are when you're in a cult, end quote, and likens it to his experience as a Scientologist long ago. His health, too, improved soon after he started on Heart. In a letter, Maggiore blasted him as, quote, a troubled ex-straight guy who sought any scheme or treatment he believed might undo his positive diagnosis, suffered with constant infections brought on by unprotected sex, ignored his health problems.
I highly recommend reading this article as well. It details the experiences of a few different HIV-positive ex-members, and some of them still seemed at the time of the article to have confusion and uncertainty about the science of what they were experiencing, but they were on Heart, highly active antiretroviral therapy, and each of them reported feeling better once they had submitted to the medically understood treatment for their diseases. The Alive and Well website seems to have been last updated around 2012, which is why I said I'm not sure how active they still are, but it is still full of disgusting misinformation, and I don't think that the characterization of this as a cult feels at all off to me. It seems like it either is or was an incredibly high control group that insists you share the same delusions, and it convinced its members to proselytize that message to others, to hand out copies of the book and convince people that they were sharing a message of hope and life when they were actually just furthering the efforts of a death cult. I think Dave Grohl was an idiot. I think this bassist was an idiot for falling for this. I think the rest of the band should have said, hey dude, what the fuck, and not done it. But I also do feel strange about this being dredged up as a way to score points against Dave Grohl in particular. You know, it does seem to have been Nate Mandel's fault, and everything seems to have been removed from their website in 2007. In the years since, as I mentioned, the band has donated to Elton John's foundation and also to Lifebeat, another HIV/AIDS organization that is not a fucked up cult. According to a Reddit comment I saw, they also have done things like publicly denounce the Westboro Baptist Church, and while I think saying, hey, it was fucked up that we got involved with AIDS denialism is always going to be the ideal move, I don't think it's a likely one. I think they've pretty clearly attempted to change course on the misinformation they did once fall for and perpetuate, and a lot of people are not very interested in stopping to apologize after they already feel like they've pretty adequately course corrected. And I just gotta say, I feel like a lot of people just do not care about the AIDS crisis until they're using its victims as easy gotcha points. And that's not the case for everybody who just got newly upset about the Foo Fighters having involvement in this, but it is the case for a lot of the Swifties who didn't read far enough into the Mother Jones article to be as mad at Alive and Well for existing as they are at Dave Grohl for speaking ill of Taylor Swift. I mean, again, this is all getting pinned as if it was Dave's thing, and Dave was on that stage. Dave does share some responsibility. This seems to be Nate Mandel's, like, little fucked up conspiracy theory pet project that eventually got removed after having been linked to specifically saying that it was at that bassist's request when it was on the website. So I really do wonder if it was a matter of, like, your friend gets into something weird and you don't know quite how dangerous what they're believing is. Again, it's bad, but they're also, like, rock star celebrities and not people who I think would ever be relied on to make good decisions all the time. I would love to know what you think. I don't even know a single Foo Fighters song all the way through, and, like, knowing that they did fall for this and let it hang on their website for 7 years is not something that makes me want to get into the band. But also, you know, in a couple of decades, are we going to feel this way about everybody who is touring right now and not mandating mask use? Are we going to bring up Lady Gaga coughing out the Chromatica ball and then normalizing it later? Are we going to talk about how people were picking up COVID at super spreader events at the Eras concert and then calling it a concert hangover? Or are we going to wait until one of those people makes a curmudgeonly joke about somebody that we like and then decide we care? And then point our finger and say, hold on, you were irresponsible in a way that a lot of people already knew was irresponsible. That's the video. A little bit of a downer ending there, I guess. I just don't think I'll ever feel safe going to a concert again. Thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in HIV, AIDS, lies, and scams, I have a 3-hour video that I just put up about a week ago about the so-called AIDS angel in Hot Springs, Arkansas. She was a liar. She was a grifter. We talked about that for 3 hours, and if you already watched it and let me know what you think, thank you so much for the feedback and the validation on that one. I'm super, super proud of that video. Obviously, it took me a very long time. If you haven't recently been tested for HIV, you should go do that. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're as surprised as my bestie was that I don't know any Foo Fighters songs. I even checked, like, I went on Spotify. No bells rung. I'll see you in the next one. I'll be back soon to talk about something. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.